So, what's happened this week in politics? Let's choose one of the big things. Sue Gray, who was a senior civil servant, which is basically someone who works in government, as far as I believe, has now asked to become Sue Gray Saga, the leader of the Labour Party, Chief of Staff, which is a pretty high position to become Chief of Staff. As far as I know, it's one of the second highest, third highest position there is in the Labour Party. So she has become and she accepted that job offer. She has become one of the top people in the Labour Party, and what's the whole controversy about this? She led this investigation into Boris Johnson. Basically, Boris Johnson broke laws during COVID. He had a party, and this thing was called Partygate. And she led this investigation into him, whether it was correct or what happened, and what actually happened, what actually took place. She became really, really famous during that time. And now, while she's moved to Labour, it looks really dodgy. Like she did something against the Conservative Party. She did a whole investigation against him. She's spent 10 months doing this, and now she's moving over to the opposite side. It seems really, only a few weeks after she released the thing as well, after she released the report. So it's a very dodgy thing. The questions are like, when did she leave? When did she get the job offer? Did she start looking into it while she was still writing the report? Because that's even worse. Is this Boris Johnson and his allies downplaying the report? That's the question. Is Boris Johnson downplaying the report by making fun of her and by saying it's not right that she's moving? Or is there an actual valid point to the criticism? What do you think?
So, firstly, great to be here again, Ellie.
You too.
Great chatting. Look, let's just first make the facts clear that she's going through a process. She's not automatically today going to be the Chief of Staff for Keir Starmer. This is a process she has to go through. It has to be signed off by the authorities, whoever they are, okay, and that will be looked at very carefully. So that's just to put it out there firstly. I do also think there's a general point here which will be helpful perhaps for listeners, for viewers to understand, which is the civil service prides itself on its political neutrality. It is completely and totally neutral. And actually, if you think about it, if you are a civil servant working in the government, it's quite a challenge. You can go through one term of parliament working for a Labour leadership. You can go through the next term working for Conservative leadership. You can have different Conservative parties. You can have someone like Boris Johnson, quite a toxic figure at the top, who you don't necessarily like, and yet you've got to carry out his orders, his commands. So it's quite a challenging job. And therefore, to rise in the ranks of the civil service, success follows success. Someone like Sue Gray has done over the years. She's been there for donkey's years. Is in itself an admirable thing, and that shouldn't be looked over. And therefore, for people to turn around today and say, "Oh, she must be in cahoots with Labour," because once she did a report that was slightly, by the way, not even dramatically, but slightly critical of Boris Johnson.
It's a very, very big report.
Okay, fair enough. It was a very big political moment and all the rest of it.
Was it critical of Boris Johnson? Or not?
It was, but it didn't go very far. I mean, the police were even more critical of him than she was. If you remember,
did it make any difference, the report?
So all the allies of Boris Johnson now are saying, "Oh, that's what brought him down. It was all a Labour plot," which is complete and total nonsense. And it didn't bring him down. What brought him down actually was an event with Chris Pincher, which is a whole different story, where he didn't react quickly enough, and the MPs got fed up with his lack of probity. But that's got nothing to do with Sue Gray, her report, or Partygate for that matter. Partygate was a sort of part of a whole huge growing dislike for Boris Johnson's leadership. But the idea that she's worked somehow in cahoots for Labour because she once did a report critical of Boris Johnson is complete nonsense. Do you know that Boris Johnson, before he decided to campaign for leave in the Brexit debate, he wrote 2 articles, reportedly, one for Remain, one for leave? Well,
they're famous.
Yeah, exactly. Is anyone going to say about Boris Johnson, "Oh, well, he once wrote an article for Remain. He can't be the campaigner for leave"?
I heard a lot of people say that too.
Yeah, but not anymore. No one says it. Everyone puts him as a poster boy of Brexit, right?
Yeah.
Liz Truss, for God's sake, she voted Remain.
Yeah.
Right? When she was voted in by the Brexiters. Why? Because they saw, she was our poster boy for Brexit. But she voted Remain once. What I'm trying to prove is, in politics, it's fluid. You can...
So do you think there's any point to when Boris Johnson and his allies and people are saying that there might be... that we shouldn't really listen to her as much, or she wasn't so neutral and she was...
I think there's 2 points to be made here. So, as far as they're saying that because she's now going to Labour, that negates the whole report she did, and somehow the report now becomes a whole great Labour plot, that's nonsense, and it should be completely ignored.
Because if it was actually a plot, they would have been much harsher.
Exactly, which has been said countless of times, and it's nonsense to think about it. That as some journalists were sort of poking fun at the argument, saying, "Oh, I bet she arranged for the bottles of wine to be ordered into Boris Johnson's flat as well as part of that plot. Like, how far are you going to go? It's ridiculous. Parties happen. No one making it up. Do you know what I mean? Let's be honest. So I do think that's nonsense. But I do think that there is a concern, and people have raised that, which is fair enough. How comfortable are we with people who have worked in the civil service? There's two problems with this.
So we solved the first problem, didn't we?
As far as legitimacy of the report, I don't think it affects it at all.
The second problem is, are we concerned that people who are supposed to be neutral are then, after finishing their careers, becoming very, very anti-neutral, and actually taking a very big side, really?
Yeah, but the question I have really is, and this actually ties a little bit into the storm that's been going on the last few days in the BBC as well. What does neutrality actually mean? Now, neutrality...
Ask BBC, they would know.
Oh, yeah. Neutrality can't mean something fundamental. That means it is impossible to ask of a human being to be devoid of opinion and to have zero. What do they vote in the elections? Or they don't vote? I mean, come on, that's ridiculous.
Do they not vote?
Of course they vote, right? Mind you, I don't know if civil servants vote. I'm sure they do, but that's complete nonsense.
Probably publicly, they don't show any particular political side.
I'll tell you something else. The Speaker of the House, right?
Which
Different
one?
Position.
John Berger?
No, he was the old Speaker, but the current Speaker...
Sir Lindsay Hoyle?
Yes.
I met him, yeah.
I'm sure you did. Well, you meet everyone. They come from a political party. Now, when they become Speaker, they renounce their... Well, it's sort of... It's an agreed that it's not a seat that's going to be fought as a political seat. But they ultimately got to their position by being part of a party. John Berger was Labour, became Conservative, became Speaker.
Labour then Conservative?
He was originally Labour, became Conservative, yep. And he became neutral, right? Oh, he was very neutral.
Then he got kicked out of the House.
Well, fine. The Sir Lindsay Hoyle was Labour, right? Now he's neutral. So what does it mean? How can it mean? So I think neutral ultimately comes down to how you behave. That's what it comes down to. So are you acting out of a clear bias to one political view?
Yeah.
And if that's apparent, then you're not being neutral. And I think that's what the BBC struggle with, but I think that's what they try and do, right? They try and say, look, guys, leave your personal opinions by the door. It doesn't mean don't have them. It doesn't mean don't talk about it at home. And it doesn't mean you can't vote for who you like. But when you come to an interview, you come to a news report, it has to be completely unclear as to which party you would actually vote for. That's the point. And I think there's no reason why someone who worked in the civil service, right, shouldn't have the same approach. So she, for all I know, and apparently Keir Starmer already said months ago, he's a very good friend of Sue Gray. I mean,
Ivan Lewis, when he was saying a few days ago, he was saying how Sue Gray is one of the from all sides, Conservative, Labour, from all political sides, how everyone looked up to her.
Yeah, absolutely.
He said he personally knows her very well, and he looked up to her.
Sure, why not? She was a very competent civil servant who knew what she did, and she knew how things worked, and she did a very good job of all the different investigations she was in charge of. But there's nothing wrong with her having personal feelings towards one particular party. I mean, for heaven's sake. Do you know that Lee Anderson currently is the vice chairman of the Conservative Party? Have you never heard of him?
No idea who that is.
Oh, really? Yeah. Check him out, because he's quite an outspoken Tory. He speaks a bit like, he's one of these Yorkshire... He's basically their card to the red wall that they want to convince the Northerners they've still got someone on their side, Yeah. Lee Anderson. Now, 4 years ago, the guy was Labour. He was a Labour councillor. He went over and became Conservative. Well, why does no one wonder about his loyalties?
No one's heard of him.
Okay, fair enough. But here's my point. But my opinion is that, look, let's just be honest, call a spade a spade. Neutrality is just in the way people act. And there's nothing wrong with her having developed, I tell you what is a concern, though, if I'm honest. I'm saying there's no concern. The concern is she's coming with a caseload of secrets from within government. She'll know where all the bodies lie, so to speak. She's now going into the opposition with all that information. That would worry me a bit. It sounds a little bit dirty, that. Do you know what I mean? She's going in there knowing all the stuff.
Guess we'll have to find out.
Yeah, we'll see what they leak in a couple of months. I don't actually think she's going to get the job.
Do you think they'll not let her?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they'll let her.
Who won't let her? The government?
Whatever body this is that has to look at the job will worry for its conflict of interest and too close to an election and all the rest of it. And they'll delay basically her appointment until they move into government. And when they move into government, then who cares?
Okay, brilliant. Let's see how it goes.
That's my prediction.